Sophie had no time to recover. There was the sound of wheels and horse hoofs. Hoofs? Horse hoofs. There was the sound of wheels and horse hoofs. Why does that sound wrong? There was the sound of wheels and horse hoofs. And a carriage darkened the window. That was an atrocity. Sophie had no time to recover. There was the sound of wheels and horse hoofs. And a carriage darkened the window. The shop bell clanged, and the grandest customer she had ever seen sailed in, with a sable wrap drooping from her elbows and diamonds winking all over her dense black dress. Sophie's eyes went to the lady's wide hat first, real ostrich plume, dyed to reflect the pinks and greens and blues winking in the diamonds, and yet still looked black. This was a wealthy hat. The lady's face was carefully beautiful. The chestnut brown hair made her seem young, but Sophie's eyes took in the young man who followed the lady in, a slightly formless-faced person with reddish hair, quite well dressed but pale and obviously upset. He stared at Sophie with a kind of beseeching horror. He was clearly younger than the lady. Sophie was puzzled. "Miss Hatter?" the lady asked in a musical but commanding voice. "Yes," Sophie said. The man looked more upset than ever. Perhaps the lady was his mother. "I hear you sell the most heavenly hats," said the lady. "Show me." Sophie did not trust herself to answer in her present mood. She went and got out hats. None of them were in this lady's class, but she could feel the man's eyes following her, and that made her uncomfortable. The sooner the lady discovered the hats were wrong for her, the sooner this odd pair would go. She followed Fanny's advice and got out the wrongest first. The lady began rejecting hats instantly. "Dimples," she said to the pink bonnet, and "youth" to the caterpillar green one. To the one of twinkles and veils she said, "Mysterious allure, how very obvious. What else have you?" Sophie got out the modish black and white, which was the only hat even remotely likely to interest this lady. The lady looked at it with contempt. "This one doesn't do anything for anybody. You're wasting my time, Miss Hatter." "Only because you came in and asked for hats," Sophie said. "This is only a small shop in a small town, madam." "Why did you—" Behind the lady the man gasped and seemed to be trying to signal warningly. "Bother to come in," Sophie finished, wondering what was going on. "I always bother when someone tries to set themselves up against the witch of the waste," said the lady. "I've heard of you, Miss Hatter, and I don't care for your competition or your attitude, and I came to put a stop to you. There." She spread out her hand in a flinging motion towards Sophie's face. "You mean you're the witch of the waste?" Sophie quavered. Her voice seemed to have gone strange with fear and astonishment. "I am," said the lady, "and let that teach you to meddle with things that belong to me." I don't think I did. There must be some mistake," Sophie croaked. The man was now staring at her in utter horror, though she could not see why. "No mistake, Miss Hatter," said the witch. "Come, Gaston." She turned and swept to the shop door. While the man was humbly opening it for her, she turned back to Sophie. "By the way, you won't be able to tell anyone you're under a spell," she said. The shop door tolled like a funeral bell as she left. Sophie put her hands to her face, wondering what the man had stared at. She felt soft, leathery wrinkles. She looked at her hands. They were wrinkled too, and skinny, with large veins in the back and knuckles like knobs. She pulled her grey skirt against her legs and looked down at skinny, decrepit ankles and feet which had made her shoes all knobbly. They were the legs of someone about 90, and they seemed to be real. Sophie got herself to the mirror and found she had to hobble. The face in the mirror was quite calm, because it was what she expected to see. It was the face of a gaunt old woman, withered and brownish, surrounded by wispy white hair. Her own eyes, yellow and watery, stared out at her, looking rather tragic. "Don't worry, old thing," Sophie said to the face. "You look quite healthy. Besides, this is much more like you really are." She thought about her situation quite calmly. Everything seemed to have gone calm and remote. She was not even particularly angry with the witch of the waste. "Well, of course I shall have to do for her when I get the chance," she told herself. But meanwhile, if Letty and Martha can stand being one another, I can stand being like this, but I can't stay here. Fanny would have a fit. Let's see, this grey dress is quite suitable, but I shall need my shawl and some food. She hobbled over to the shop door and carefully put up the closed notice. Her joints creaked as she moved. She had to walk bowed and slow, but she was relieved to discover that she was quite a hale old woman. She did not feel weak or ill, just stiff. She hobbled to collect her shawl and wrapped it over her head and shoulders, as old women did. Then she shuffled through into the house where she collected her purse with a few coins in it, and a parcel of bread and cheese. She let herself out of the house, carefully hiding the key in the usual place, and hobbled away down the street, surprised at how calm she still felt. She did wonder if she should say goodbye to Martha, but she did not like the idea of Martha not knowing her. It was best to just go. Sophie decided that she was right to both her sisters when she got wherever she was going and shuffled on, through the field where the fair had been over the bridge, and on into the country lanes beyond. It was a warm spring day. Sophie discovered that being crone did not stop her enjoying the sight and smell of May in the hedgerows. Though the sight was a little blurred, her back began to ache. She hobbled sturdily enough, but she needed a stick. She searched the hedges as she went for a loose stake of some kind. Evidently her eyes were not as good as they had been. She thought she saw a stick a mile or so on, but when she hauled on it, it proved to be the bottom end of an old scarecrow someone had thrown into the hedge. Sophie heaved the thing upright. It had a withered turnip for a face. Sophie found she had some fellow feeling for it. Instead of pulling it to pieces and taking the stick, she stuck it between two branches of the hedge so that it stood looming rakishly above the May, with the tattered sleeves on its stick arms fluttering over the hedge. "There," she said. Her cracked old voice surprised her, giving into a cracked old cackle of laughter. "Neither of us are up to much, are we, my friend? Maybe you'll get back to your field if I leave you where people can see you." She set off up the lane again, but a thought struck her, and she turned back. "Now, if I wasn't doomed to failure because of my position in the family," she told the scarecrow, "you could come to life and offer me help in making my fortune. But I wish you luck anyway." She cackled again as she walked on. Perhaps she was a little mad, but then old women often were. She found a stick an hour or so later, when she sat down on the bank to rest and eat her bread and cheese. There were noises in the hedge behind her, little strangled squeakings followed by heavings that shook May petals of the hedge. Sophie crawled on her bony knees to peer past leaves and flowers and thorns into the inside of the hedge, and discovered a thin grey dog in there. It was hopelessly trapped by a stout stick which had somehow got twisted into a rope that was tied round its neck. The stick had wedged itself between two branches of the hedge so that the dog could barely move. It rolled its eyes widely at Sophie's peering face. As a girl, Sophie was scared of all dogs. Even as an old woman, she was quite alarmed by the 2 rows of white fangs in the creature's open jaws. But she said to herself, "The way I am now, it's scarcely worth worrying about," and felt in her sewing pocket for her scissors. She reached into the hedge and with the scissors sawed away at the rope around the dog's neck. The dog was very wild. It flinched away from her and growled, but Sophie sawed bravely on. "You'll starve or throttle to death, my friend," she told the dog in her cracked old voice, "unless you let me cut you loose. In fact, I think someone has tried to throttle you already. Maybe that accounts for your wildness." The rope had been tied quite tightly around the dog's neck. And the stick had been twisted viciously into it. It took a lot of sawings before the rope parted and the dog was able to drag itself out from under the stick. "Would you like some bread and cheese?" Sophie asked it then, but the dog just growled at her, forced its way out through the opposite side of the hedge and slunk away. "There's gratitude for you," Sophie said, rubbing her prickled arms. "But you left me a gift in spite of yourself." She pulled the stick that had trapped the dog out of the hedge and found it was a proper walking stick, well trimmed and tipped with iron. Sophie finished her bread and cheese and set off walking again.